Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Up for Women, Speak Up to Lead Up. Today is episode 128, and we are so grateful to introduce our episode sponsor today, Hey Taxi. Hey Taxi empowers and educates female entrepreneurs who are growing their business online. Hey Taxi's Empowered CEO membership is for you if you are a female entrepreneur who is ready and fully committed in taking action to run a successful, profitable business and ready to scale quickly. You need strategic support from experienced business peers who can partner to develop action plans and provide access to focused business trainings and go-to tools covering all of the areas running a business online, including finance, taxes, sales, marketing, and mindset, and direct access to vetted business CPAs, live interactive trainings, on-the-go business resources, virtual networking with your peers, potential customers and collaborators, registration to 3 signature business and tax masterclasses, training on leveraging affiliate programs for additional business income, one-on-one coaching sessions with the founders, plus a community of like-minded female entrepreneurs to support you in running and scaling a profitable legacy business. Take the Hey Taxi Swiss Cheese Survey today to identify the gaps and the gold stars in your current business strategy and structure. So ladies, today we are going to be discussing how the authors change the world. And many of you know I introduced my latest book this year called Step Into the Spotlight to Expand Your Influence and Attract the Right Clients. And I did not write that book so that one person could read it or 200 people could read it. I wrote that book with 10 other authors, so tens and thousands of millions of people can read that book and be impacted by the words we wrote. So today with our guest, Carolyn Roark, we are going to be diving into how authors change the world and how she assists them and empowers them in doing that. So Carolyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you for allowing me to join you.
It's a pleasure. So let me tell you a little bit about Carolyn. Carolyn Roark is an impact engineer helping authors change the world through transformative books. As a ghostwriter, she focuses on shepherding stories to publications to maximize their impact and make the reader's life better. I love that because books to me, Carolyn, changed my life. I read a lot of books, several of them a year. I do exercises that are in books. I tend to navigate 2 books that have exercises in them so that you can really practice, what is in the book. And so talk to me a little bit about the way in which you work with authors for them to truly make the impact. What is the secret sauce? Maybe I'm getting into this a little deep, but what is the secret sauce behind that? Everyone wants to tell a story, or we all have a purpose for being here, but there's a way in which to do it. I believe that you make the greatest impact. So talk to us a little bit about how that journey has been for you and maybe some of the authors you've worked with.
Sure. Well, to begin with, because I think of writing as a craft, I don't tend to think of there being a secret sauce that you sort of put on the top once it's all over and done with. Instead, it is a process that you undertake. And ideally, it's much like construction or painting or, where you try to think about what you want your impact to be from the beginning. And then every choice you make along the way, you make with that impact in mind. Doesn't mean that you can't adapt. It doesn't mean that you can't make changes if something isn't working. But I think there's really 3 things that an author needs to do to make sure that their writing, especially their book, is going to have the impact they want it to have. And the first is to understand that a book is a tool, just like any other tool that exists to serve a purpose. Now, I think it's much easier for authors to kind of get their brains around the idea of the book as a tool for the reader. If I want to have my pants scared off, I go get a Stephen King book. If I want to build a doghouse that's not going to fall apart on my dog's head, I go and I get a For Dummies book. So they're able to say, oh, okay, yes, I understand that whether it's to entertain them or it's to move them or it's to help them learn a practical skill, the book is a tool for the reader. What they don't always get is that a book needs to be a tool for themselves as well. As an author, you should really get clarity as quickly as you can, as early in the process as you can, on what you want that book to do for you. And there's no right or wrong answer, accepting that there's a right answer for you, right? If you need a book for lead generation, then it shouldn't be written as though it was intended to drive a speaking career. If your dream is to be on a TED stage, then it shouldn't be written as though you were processing trauma. So it's important to understand, practically speaking, where you want that book to take you, what role you want it to fulfill for you, because that's how you help make sure you get that return on investment. And by that, I mean your investment of your money, of course, but also your time and the huge sort of emotional and psychological effort that goes into every book. And as an author yourself, there's a lot of mental and emotional heavy lifting that goes into writing a book. So that's thing one. Thing two is understanding how you want to get to publication. And in this day and age, there's absolutely nothing wrong, of course, with desiring that traditional contract, with wanting to get a spot with one of the big five or with a press that is going to impress people. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's important to understand whether or not you really need that. I've known people who have a whole cottage industry around their self-published books, and they're doing just fine, and they don't need anything from the traditional publishing world. Thank you very much. And then in terms of impact, of course, this one's obvious. You know it, I know it. I'm sure all your readers know it too, but there's a difference in knowing it and doing it. And that is understanding that you need to have a platform to support it. You need to know how that book or the word about that book is going to travel down the right channels so that the people you want to help and whose lives you want to affect will know that it's out there and will get excited about encountering it.
Yeah, it's so true, because if you're not and I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is such a key point in the whole why behind your writing the book, right? Where do you want that book to fall in with how you're impacting your community, what your work is? And I see so many authors write books and it literally becomes just something they send out at, free to someone, and they're not really utilizing the full gamut of what being an author can do for you. Yeah, there's ancillary benefits and, media. Some media will take you, in line first if you're an author versus other media. But why, if you're putting so much time and effort and thought and money into an investment, right? An investment of time, energy, and money into writing the book, why not leverage that to your advantage? And I love that you went over those 3 points, because I just see so many authors write books just to write books, but there's not a meaning behind it. And it wasn't until I met a publisher that I was working with that really helped me understand how to create calls to action, how to utilize it within a marketing plan, how to lead people back to programs that I had and things that I did. So basically, how to bring them into your community once you've written the book. And I've read books that bring me into their community once once I read their book, it becomes a piece of what they do, just a piece of a piece of the puzzle. So without it, the puzzle's not complete. Yeah, I love that,
Exactly.
Carolyn. So how did you get into being, did you love to write when you were a child, or where did this come into being a ghostwriter for you? How did you get started in this?
It was a pivot. I think many women who end up running their own businesses get there initially or walk through the door because it's a pivot. Something in your life changes radically, and you're thinking, what now? In my case, yes, I always did love to write, and books have always been my best friends. I have to admit, in most cases, on most days, I'd rather interact with a book than another human being. But I had gotten started in academics. I taught at the university level, and that came to an abrupt and painful end when I was in 2000, when it was 2008. And I had always thought, I went straight into graduate school out of undergrad. I had a PhD before I turned 30. I had always believed that that was a vocation, that that was the thing that I was meant to do, that it was given to me from on high, that I needed to be doing that. And when that came to an end, I had no idea who I was anymore. And I had to sit down and think, okay, well, I may not have a vocation, but I still have a dog that I need to feed, and I need to keep a roof over my own head. And so what am I going to do? And I was a very competent writer. I was good at teaching people writing. That was one of the things that I had done. And I thought, okay, well, let's see if I can build something out of that. And I did what most new freelance writers do, which was basically throw myself at everything until I figured out the niche that I made sense for me and that I loved. And that turned out to be working on books and helping people build books. And at that point, I was able to make a shift, I think, that a lot of freelance writers don't make, which is that mind flip from I am a freelance professional to I am running a business. And so at that point, I made some big changes so that I could think about what I was doing with people and the products that I was helping them create as being a business, and something that I needed to treat as a business, and something that I needed to run as a business. And that's how I ended up where I am.
Yeah, so starting way back in academics. And it's interesting because whenever I talk to someone and they mention to me in my interviews that they prefer to read a book than be around people, I automatically stem that back to, so tell me about your background. And it usually has something to do with academics, or they were, a professor or something where, they were teaching in academics. And it totally makes sense to me. So I understand why we love books, and maybe it's because we create our own our own I wouldn't call it a reality, but a different world, in our books and reading books. And I love to read self-help books. I'm not, I love nonfiction books. I'm not a big fiction reader. Some people, that's all they love to read. I've interviewed ladies on the show here that that's the books that they write. Several series of fiction books and hot and steamy, sexy books, and all those. And everyone likes to get lost in whatever that world is. When I pick up a book, it's I'm just stuck to picking it up for education always. But I love a good story. But still, even out of a good story, I get a point out of that, an education out of that. No matter what book that is. So let's talk about someone who wants to become an author. What would you give advice, Carolyn, on the steps that they should be taking and thinking, I really want to write a book of my own. What are the stages that you feel that potential author goes through, and really the steps that they should take to be prepared to go through the process to become an author? I think that's very important for people.
It is. And there's a lot of heavy lifting involved. Whether you choose to write the book yourself as a writing author, or whether you choose to work with a professional ghostwriter, there's a lot of mental heavy lifting, emotional heavy lifting involved. And there's joy in it, but it's also, effort. Just like, you can really love your hot yoga class, but you also know it's going to be a labor, right? So it's important that you should be prepared for that. There is a difference between having a vague daydream of being an author and having something to say that you're actually ready to put out there. And, I still have fond daydreams of being a ballet dancer, but at the age I am now, and even when I was young enough and my knees worked well enough, I wasn't going to put in the work, right? That it took to try. So it's important, I think, to begin when you're ready to begin and not before you're ready to begin. Because if you begin before you really have clarity on the fact that you have something to say, what you want to say, and that you feel ready to say it, then you won't have any direction and you'll be easily frustrated and you'll probably give up. When you have that message in your heart and in your head, and you know that message is weighing on you, right? It's pressing on you. That's when it's time to move forward and start doing that work. That doesn't be like a scroll come down for the mountain, you know, all neat and ready to go. And there's still a lot of, you know, work that will need to be done. And it's fine to know that, okay, I'm going to have to really work to get clarity. I'm going to have to work to figure out exactly how to say it, how to touch the people I want to touch, how to speak to the people I want to speak to in a language that they understand. It's
a
fine not to
commitment.
have that ready. Yeah, you know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't write a single word until it's all perfect in your mind. But it is, I think, the right time to begin is the time when you feel that message pressing, you know, and pressing sort of against the inside of your head and your heart, like, let me out now. And that's when you begin. And at that point, that's when you start getting words on a screen or on paper, however you prefer it. And at that point, I would say embrace the chaos. Embrace the fact that it's probably going to be messy. You're probably going to hate 95.82% of everything that's on that page. That's okay. Just keep going, keep moving forward, keep creating the rough stuff. And then you can pull out the real sort of gold from all of that and keep moving from there. And be patient. It is a process. Sometimes you have to go back and start over or rework things many times before it finally reaches the stage where you know it's right. And that's okay. You're not the only person who's ever experienced that. You will not be the only person after you're done to experience it. And you can get there if you keep trying. It's a craft. It's not an art. It's not something that you have to have an innate talent for to have any chance. It's a skill you can build with effort and practice.
Yeah, totally agree. And then, you know, we have our ghostwriters, which is you, Carolyn. So, you know, you have an author that wants to write every word on the page and then, you know, get an editor to edit that for them. And, you know, when it comes to writing, you should just get it out, right? Just get it out. Try not to get it in all different orders. Just get out what's in your heart. I remember someone asked me several years ago if I was going to write a book. And honestly, I felt like an infant in the entrepreneur world. And I felt like I wasn't ready. There was so much in my windshield still that wasn't in my rearview mirror. There was a lot in my rearview mirror. But what I felt at that moment wasn't pressing, like you had said. And I knew that as I've gone along in the years and have done some compilation books with others and contributed some chapters and some advice in some other books, I was ready for that. But I still haven't felt the pressing, you've got to get a story out there. There's, you know, God's telling me now, this is the time, you know, and I know that when the time will be right, I'll know when the time is right. And it's not there for me yet. And as a ghostwriter, what is that process for someone who, I want to say that who would, I don't even know how to say this in the right way, so I probably shouldn't say it at all.
Are you asking who should use a ghostwriter?
Yeah, let's just start there.
Okay. It's really simple. If you are smart and accomplished and you have something to say, but you're too busy slaying it in your own niche, and or you just don't feel like putting words to the page is in your wheelhouse, but you know you have the expertise and you know you have the message, that's when you go and you find a professional ghost. Because what we do is we take all of that stuff that is already in your head and we just pull it out, and then we put it down on the page and we get it in the right order and we do it in the right way so that it will resonate with the people that you want to touch. And it's, it's not cheating. There's, it doesn't mean that you're taking the easy way out, or that you're that you're not doing something the right way. There's still going to be a lot of heavy lifting for you involved. It's perfectly fine if you are so busy doing what you do and kicking ass in your own profession to say, I really want to bring in a collaborator to help me with this. It's cheating to have pay somebody to do your homework for you in college. It's perfectly fine to bring in a professional. You don't cut your own hair. You probably don't do your own plumbing and HVAC work.
No.
I don't do
my own
marketing.
nails.
Yeah. I don't do my own nails. I don't do my own marketing. So you go to somebody that you know is a great professional at those things, and you work with them so that you can get yourself and your message out in the best way in the world.
I'm glad you said that, because I think there's some stigma around what you had said of, I want to write my book because it comes from me. It's coming from you, whether someone else is putting the words on paper, or it's still coming from your brain. It's still coming from your head. It's still coming from your heart. It's still coming from your experience. It's still coming from your wisdom. It's coming from you. And I'm glad that you put it in the eloquent way that you did, because I've worked with a lot of women that get caught up on writing the story or writing the words on paper. And so they never get a book out, because that's their stopping point. But if someone were to come in and ask them the right questions, and they shared the right information, and that person, as a ghostwriter, wrote their words down on paper, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, does that process speed up a little bit through the ghostwriter writing, or would you say it's, the same amount of time?
I think what's most important is that it gets it off your plate. For some people, it does mean that it speeds things up, because if you never have time to write yourself, then of course, getting your book done in a year to 18 months is going to be quicker than the 5 years it would take you if you wrote a few paragraphs every time you took a vacation.
Yeah.
But it is still a process. And it's important to know that even working with a ghost, it can take a lot of collaboration. It takes iterations. It takes moving things around and massaging them and having good conversations to get that content so that it's just right. And I think this can be especially challenging for women. It's every woman's dilemma, right? That we all feel like we have to be all things to all people and do everything ourselves. And that we don't have the right to ask for help or to hand things off to somebody else when we really just can't add another ball, to that. So really, I think as much as anything else, it's about giving yourself permission to get the help you need, whatever kind of help that might be, when you need it, and to allow that process to flow naturally and to have ebbs and flows.
Yeah. So can I ask you, what was your favorite project that you've worked on thus far?
The projects that I love best are the ones that, when I send them out into the world, I just know that they're going to make a change, a meaningful change for the life of the reader. I've done my share of CEO, I did it my way, ego projects. I've done some of those business allegories that the author is convinced is brand new and no one's ever thought of it before. And yet everybody else knows that it's, the same perennial advice, right?
Yeah.
And there's a place for those books in the world. And there are certainly plenty of ghostwriters out there who love to take on those projects. For me, I like knowing that if a book is going to go out there and somebody picks it up, it's going to help them make a real, meaningful, positive change, whether that's helping them get through a difficult time like a cancer diagnosis, or survive career burnout in a caregiving type of profession, or other, kind of profession where we really tend towards burnout, or whether it's an innovative idea that's going to save the seals and rescue the climate and help people live to be 200 years old.
Yeah, it makes a difference. Makes a difference. Carolyn, it's been such a pleasure having you with us today on the podcast. I've learned so much. I've never really had the opportunity to sit down and interview a ghostwriter. I've interviewed several authors, I've interviewed several publishers of books, and you're definitely the first ghostwriter that I've interviewed. And it's just been an honor to learn more about your passion and why you do it. And thank you for your service, for working with authors to assist them in, so I guess the message today is it really doesn't matter how busy you are, what you have on your plate, what your world looks like. Just as Carolyn said, if you're out there slaying it and crushing it, hire yourself a ghostwriter. If it's pounding in your chest and in your heart and it's pushing to get out, and now is the time for you to share that message, come up with a plan, work with Carolyn to come up with that plan for her to help you be able to take your message out into the world. To make a true impact. So, Carolyn, how can our listeners reach you today? We have some information there at their fingertips that they can click on, and some of the links, but what is one of the best ways for them to reach you and learn more about you?
Absolutely. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. So certainly I invite you to make a connection with me on LinkedIn. I especially love being connected with smart, successful, accomplished women on LinkedIn. So that's a great place to start. And I would love to send people to my website, which is writing, that is WRITING, Texan.com. And there you can find out more about who I am. You can look at some of my projects. And there's a quiz there that you can take if you're not sure where you are, if you need kind of a diagnosis about where you are in the process and what kind of professional you might want to work with. Then that quick quiz will help you figure out, would you benefit from a ghost? Are you at a point where you really need a writing coach instead? Are you ready to go and you just need a proofreader? That quiz is there to help you self-diagnose that.
Oh, I love that, Carolyn. Thank you so much for providing that to our listeners today. And thank you all for being with us today. And I want you to remember as we sign off today that you are the only you that's ever been. You're the only you that will ever be. So how you pioneer your future is up to you. And if now is the time for you to write a book, now is the time for you to be reaching out to Carolyn. So until next week, make sure you take care, be you, and be strong. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye for now.
Bye now.